Welcome to Navigating Equity Compensation, a webinar series hosted by Countsy. Today we will discuss equity without the headache, outsourcing plan administration for public and private companies. Our guests today are Sarah Kirk, Senior Corporate Counsel at ThreadUp, Kirsten Anderson, Director of Global Equity Compensation at Penumbra, Karen Coletta, Senior Consultant, Equity Outsourcing at Countsy, and today's moderator is Corrine Schneider, Founding Partner at Compass Strategic Advisors. We hope you enjoy this conversation, and Corrine, now over to you. Well, thanks. Happy New Year, everybody. We had to make sure we pushed all the right buttons there, so everybody's a little rusty at the beginning of the year. Really excited about today's conversation, and part of it is because I'm joined by three very talented and well-experienced professionals. And we're going to talk about a lot of things that they have been experiencing at their companies, but also talking a bit about the experience of outsourcing to another company. So joining us, as we said, Karen, who runs outsourcing at Countsy. She manages a number of both public and private companies. So we'll get some of her experience being the person who manages a team that supports companies with their stock plans. And then we have Kirsten, who is in the finance department at Penumbra, and Sarah, who's in the legal department at ThreadUp. So again, different perspectives on the same topic. But maybe just so everybody knows a little bit more, Kirsten, maybe you could start by just telling us a little bit about the company, about the plans, a little bit about your situation, and then we'll have Sarah do the same, and then we'll get into some of the questions we have.
So Penumbra is a biomedical device company, and we manufacture products. We suction blood clots out of the body and the brain. So we started as a neurovascular stroke intervention, and then we've now moved on to the peripheral. And so anywhere there's a clot in the body, a Penumbra device can actually suction it out rather quickly. So it's amazing technology. Let's see. I've been with the company going on 10 years. I started as a creative consultant, and 6 to 8 weeks later, I permed, and I've been there ever since now. So it's 9.5 years. Let's see. And I think maybe, is that, our plans?
What's your plans? Yeah.
We have an equity plan where we grant RSUs as well as PSUs. And then we also have what I would call plain vanilla ESPP program that's open to all employees.
Great. And you're on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yes, we are. We went public September 18th, 2015.
Okay. So more than 10 years. Okay.
More than 10 years.
And you're on the E-Trade system.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Great. Okay. And Sarah, just a little bit of background on you and the company.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sarah Kirk. I'm Senior Corporate Counsel at ThreadUp Inc. We're a publicly traded company that's listed on NASDAQ and IPO'd in 2021. We are a secondhand clothing e-commerce platform. So we have a technology stack that allows people to send in their clothing. We list it on our website, and you can purchase it online. So we have direct-to-consumer product. We use E-Trade for our equity. And like Kirsten, we have a kind of a basic stock plan for RSUs, PSUs, and then also a very plain vanilla ESPP.
Great. And Karen, do you just want to quickly give a little background on what you do and the Countsy situation?
Sure. Hi, my name is Karen Coletta. I currently oversee the equity administration team at Countsy. Countsy provides full service or partial outsourcing equity administration for both private and public companies. We are a preferred partner of Morgan Stanley, and we support multiple equity platforms. From day-to-day transactions to specialized projects, we deliver accuracy, compliance, and seamless support for all our clients.
Great. Yeah, and just to be clear, you work with all kinds of different firms, and we happen to have two E-Trade clients here, but I'm sure you work with companies that are on different platforms or use different wealth management providers. So just to be clear, you're not just working with Morgan Stanley. Great. So let's jump into it. First of all, maybe Kirsten or Sarah, I don't know if you guys were the ones that made the decision to outsource your stock plans, or maybe that was already there when you arrived, but I'm curious if you made the decision, what went into making that decision. How do you feel about the fact that, you've outsourced it? Because the traditional way of doing it was always you'd hire a stock administrator, they'd work at the company, they'd manage everything. And so I'm curious why you haven't gone down that route and you've decided to outsource to Countsy. Maybe Kirsten, you want to go first?
I can start. So originally the decision was that it was too large of an ask while we were going public to try to go onto a platform. And at the time we originally went on to Solium ShareWorks. And so we outsourced and brought in, it's all the same players. The names have just changed over the years. So
Yeah.
we started with Accretive Solutions. They became RGP and now Countsy. So we brought them in to kind of help with policies and procedures to ensure that we had accuracy, segregation of duties. There was a whole plethora of reasons to bring them in and have them assist. And that was made prior to our IPO. So we've been partnering with the team for 10 and a half years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I actually joined a year after ThreadUp went public. So the decision to outsource was before my time. But when I did join and, was kind of learning the ropes about stock administration, my understanding was that the decision was made to outsource at the time of, ahead of our IPO, just because we're a fairly small publicly traded company. And, we assessed whether it made more sense to hire someone in-house or to outsource. And it made more sense for us to use a third party.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's what you hear a lot, why people do it. Yeah. And the cost, I think, of having someone in-house, it's gotten quite high. And then it's also managing that person, their training, when they leave, replacing them, they're on vacation, that type of thing. So it does start to become difficult. Kirsten, you mentioned something, or maybe Sarah, about segregation of duties. So let's talk a little bit about that from, and Kirsten, you're more from the finance side, but I think Sarah from the legal side too, just the risk that you take when you have one person managing your stock plan. How have the auditors reacted? Are they happy with this? Kind of where do you see that particular topic factoring into the decision?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely our internal audit team loves that we use a third party for the equity administration. We do, assessments every year about internal controls and make sure that, there are segregations of duties between, these third party consultants and the actual ThreadUp employees when it comes to equity grants. And it's very helpful that we're able to, ask our Countsy, counterpart to pull a report showing that employees at ThreadUp only have read-only access in Equity Edge, right? Like you can't go in there and make any changes without going to someone at Countsy. So it's extremely helpful when we review our internal controls that there are those segregations of duty when it comes to the equity.
Right. It's also the same at Penumbra. We grant equity. My counterpart at Countsy does all of the loading, the activation. We can run reports that show that there's never been an employee that was, or an individual was never added, granted equity by anybody other than through the normal course of action. And everything is tied back. And yes, the auditors think that's great, that they can literally look at every single component and see that there's nothing nefarious or
right
anything else. It's very clean.
Yeah. And you can do Google searches. There were situations, there were some very well-known Silicon Valley companies where even when they had more than one person perpetrating the fraud. They were conspiring together to do it, to grant themselves an option, exercise the option, and take the money. There was one famous case, there were 4 people in accounting, and it was the transfer agent ultimately who notified the CFO and said, it just seems weird that these same 4 people keep getting stock options, exercising them, and we're transferring shares into their Schwab account or wherever it was going. And then, they all serve jail time, but it is crazy. Karen, is this normal when you're working with clients? Like, is this a requirement at Countsy, or do you have some companies who look at it differently?
No, it's the same thing with most of our clients. We do all the processing on their behalf, just so that we are accountable for it. And for auditing purposes, there's only one person going into the database making these updates. Most clients like it. They like the fact that they only have read only. They can't go in there. They can't change anything. So it's a setup we do for all of our clients, unless the CFO wants, or someone within the company wants, read write access. But we don't recommend it, just because we want to take accountability for the work that we're doing.
Right. So I assume in your 404 documentation, this is all included and disclosed to the right people, that this is the setup. So a real benefit of outsourcing. I guess you can't do this you could set up something if you weren't outsourcing, I guess, that only one person could grant and only one person can exercise or send issuing instructions to the transfer agent, but it gets, you get more people, gets more costly and all of that. So let's talk a little bit about your plans, just so we understand how they work. So, Kirsten, I think you got an unusual ESPP plan, don't you? Do you do things a little bit differently?
I think we're relatively vanilla. We have 2 purchases per year. We're 423 compliant. We have a look back, 15% discount.
And
our look back is just to the, we look at the purchase date, grant date, and purchase date, or subscription date. And
yeah. And does that include your international employees?
It does not. That is actually, we do have, that's the unusual component.
Yeah.
So we have what we call an OUS rebate program, where we allow international employees to purchase equity on the open market through a broker in their home country, or a bank in their home country. They remit the information to the equity team, and then we work with the local payroll team and we rebate them 15%. So we do allow, we're trying to mimic the program without having to work through regular payroll in terms of contributions.
Okay. And just curious, is that taxable? I guess it depends on the country, right?
So the rebates are taxable.
Yes. Because it's basically compensation to that person.
Right.
Okay. And does Countsy handle all of that for you, or do you do that separately?
We do that separate.
Okay. All right. Interesting. And then Sarah, you said you have pretty plain vanilla plan. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing in terms of, when you say plain vanilla, what are the choices that people have?
Right. So I think the main component of our stock plan is RSU grants to new hires, for promotions, and then we also do annual refresh grants for qualifying employees. And Countsy oversees all of those processes. We also do board compensation through Equity Edge. So we do board retainer grants and annual grants to the directors, all handled through that same process. And then, very similar to Kirsten, we have an ESPP plan that is for all employees that, same thing, 15% discount, 2 offering periods, 2 enrollment periods a year. And that is also totally overseen by Countsy and, our payroll team. So, they're kind of able to be plugged into all of the different departments at ThreadUp that kind of have to work together to get those kinds of projects off the ground. So, plugged into our accounting team, our people team, our payroll team. but yeah, that's, I think, kind of the scope of our equity program here.
Okay. And what type of participation do you have in ESPP? Do you know?
I can't say offhand what the percentage is, but it is very popular. Like we have ThreadUp doesn't just have corporate employees, right? We also have distribution center employees kind of across the country. And it is a very popular kind of mechanism for those folks to be able to, participate in company equity. So I know that it is a popular benefit at our distribution centers.
Wow. So how do you communicate to those people? Do they understand what an ESPP is, or do you have to spend a little
so it's, it is whenever we have internal communications within the company, you have to make sure that you tailor your message to the audience. And one kind of mechanism that we have is that we have kind of on-site managers, at our distribution centers who are a little bit more plugged into like what's happening at the corporate offices. So we make sure that when we're liaising with like all of the employees, that the distribution center people managers like really have a good grasp of what the ESPP benefit is. We make flyers, we have, kind of videos internal that like people can watch to kind of learn more about how like equity works and, what an ESPP like participation means. But I will say that, we have a stock administration email for, all of ThreadUp. Anyone can email us, and our consultant at County is actually a part of that, which is great because 95% of the emails we get are like stock, E-Trade questions that, he's able to answer and like before I can even read the email. But we'll get them all the time. It's varying degrees of sophistication, right? Where it's like, someone asking us really nuanced, advice about their ISOs pre-IPO, and then someone else just kind of asking, how do I buy stock in the ESPP? So you kind of have all of those resources to like all of the employees, and you're able to answer the questions and kind of get meaningful participation that way.
Right. And I assume, Karen, that you guys monitor it, and then if a question is really bespoke to the company, then you send it back to Sarah and say, this is not something, like if someone says, why did I get more than Johnny, it's not fair, that you probably send that back to the company.
Yes, that's correct. We will answer as much as we can in the inbox. And then if it's something very specific like that, we will send it back to the company just because they can respond based upon their knowledge with this employee.
Got it. And Kirsten, what about you? Do you know your ESPP participation percentage?
I think we're currently at about 50%. I'm trying to think about in the US, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would say it's pretty high. Probably about 2,000 employees. So we have about 4,000 total. So about 50% are participating. And the same thing, Sarah. We have people that write in daily. We have a shared email box. My county consultant is on that. He answers those questions regularly, unless it's very specific. And usually he'll ping me and say, hey, Kirsten, can you handle this one? We had one yesterday, even that somebody wanted tax advice. I'm like, okay, I really can't give you tax advice, but I can at least walk you through a lot of, and where your understanding is incorrect. Cause he was kind of thinking, oh, well, I got granted an RSU a year ago. So I've held it now for a year. So I'll be taxed at a lower rate. And like, unfortunately, vesting is when the share becomes a share. It's not a share prior to that point. So
yeah. In a way, people are more educated these days. Like stock is more of a traditional thing, but in a way, there's a lot of misinformation. I was talking to one of my relatives, and he said, well, I just go to ChatGPT and I ask them for answers to everything, and I was like, run some of that by me, because I don't know if that's necessarily going to be correct, or if it's really correct for your company. That's what people don't realize too, is that companies have different designs. Right. And it turns out his company actually does a net settlement, and he didn't understand that. So, that's something ChatGPT didn't ask him. Interesting. So if you were a new person who's thinking about outsourcing, this was your decision and it was new, what are some of the things that you would take into account if you're making that decision? What advice would you give your your colleague who comes to you and says, I don't know, maybe I want to do it in-house. I have more control over everything. I can run reports whenever I want. That's what you always hear is, am I going to lose that control? Am I going to lose? Is there going to be a time issue, a delay issue? What would you say to somebody thinking about this decision?
I know I can still run reports. We can still run the reports. So our ability to do that, and same thing for the rest of the finance and accounting team. We can, I've got individuals that, leave the country and they're still able to pull reports and or working in the middle of the night. I was kind of lamenting one of my coworkers who kind of got going late one day. And so he was pinging me at 8:00 and I'm like, I'm sitting down to dinner, but fantastic that you're running reports on E-Trade right now. And so we still have that. I think the nice thing is that from an expense, it's such so cost effective for us to be able to have somebody from County, even in our forfeiture rate, and a lot of the analysis work that goes into that is definitely a cost savings for us versus having an individual on our team who would be, say, dedicated to handling all of that.
Right.
And the expense and the benefits, not just the salary, but everything that would go into that.
Right. You're right. The expense of expensing is,
Yes.
You need someone who, I think that's the other thing people don't realize is that you need people with different talents, like Sarah being in the legal department, probably looks at some things differently than Kirsten does in the finance department than someone who might, in IT or in other areas. So it's hard to find one person who really knows all of that. So then you start to have bits of different people. Karen, that's a good question. So because what we're really trying to do is educate people about why outsourcing is something that you should consider. And I'll tell you all the things I've ever heard. So, and I used to run an outsourcing firm, so I understand the benefits, but people would say to me, well, I'm afraid if I run these reports, you got your guy at 8:00 at night running the reports. What if the data hasn't been updated? How do I know that County has actually done everything for the day and they haven't put it off for a couple of days? And so I'm running a report maybe that's missing some data. How do you respond to that?
So we always keep in good communication with our clients just to make sure that they're aware of their database and where it stands. Once we complete tasks that come in, if it's uploading grants or entering terminations, we will notify the client, and we usually will send them an email just to let them know that their database is updated, for example, at quarter end, year end, month end, so that they know the reports that they're running capture all changes for the month, quarter, or the year, and it's most up to date. And they've got good reports in their hands. A lot of our clients, though, when it comes to specialized reporting or important reports that they need run, they will actually have us run them for them just because we have the experience and we know how to input the parameters correctly to make sure they're getting the data that they need and they're looking for.
Yeah. That is a risk. If you don't understand how the system works and you put the wrong inputs in, then you might get the wrong reports. Have you ever run into that where you've got a client who didn't know what they were doing and the report was wrong?
Yes, we run into that often when others outside of maybe finance, sometimes HR reps will go in there and start to run reports looking for equity that an employee is holding that's vested or unvested, and they won't run it correctly. And unfortunately, they'll pull the wrong information and then come back to us asking why the data didn't match what they thought. And then it's usually the parameters that are incorrect that they're inputting.
Yeah. And so what about you, Sarah, in terms of, what you would say to someone considering outsourcing versus bringing it in-house, kind of putting on your legal hat? What would you say to somebody?
Yeah, I think that, we already touched on how it does make compliance a lot more straightforward when it comes to assessing internal controls, ensuring there's appropriate segregation of duties for equity grants. So that has definitely made it a lot easier. And then just kind of on the point about pulling reports, it's like I ask our County rep for equity reports at least once a week. Whatever we have, like, for attorneys, right? Like, I'm working on our proxy statement, I'm working on our Section 16 filings. It's like, I know that the reports that I'm getting from our consultant are correct, and I don't need to, second guess or double check anything. It's like, I know that the report that he ran is what is happening in E-Trade. So there is like a comfort in that when you're making sure that the data you're reporting, in SEC filings is correct. Working on our 10K, it's a similar process where, I'll reach out to him and just to confirm these numbers that we're reporting, and he'll send us the report. It's like the auditors, like these reports, it's perfect backup, everyone's comfortable with this number. So it really does kind of make it easier for like legal filings, just, knowing that this is like a source of truth and I don't have to question, like Karen's point, like, were these parameters correct? If I like spelled out exactly in an email what we're trying to do, like he totally gets it and like sends it to you, like in an hour.
Yeah. And so on the expensing side, because that gets kind of complex, Kirsten, when I assume you're the one who's managing the expense and running all of those reports. Do you have others at your company that need to get involved, give you the forfeiture rate or, whatever the assumptions are that are going to be input, or is that all run through you? And is that a messy process or is that generally pretty simple and streamlined?
We actually have somebody at County that does our forfeiture rate for us, and he does an analysis. So he steps in once a quarter, and as Karen was mentioning, he normally will send an email. He'll want to make sure that our terminations are up to date, all of our grants have been entered as well as vested. I want to say there's about 4 different questions that he asks every quarter, wanting to make sure, that we've looked at everything. Oh, departments are updated. And then he'll go through and prepare the forfeiture rate analysis for us. Normally we have somebody in-house within the accounting team that also runs it, and we cross-check to. Part of it is just also so we can get a jump start on our quarter close. But at the same time, we want to make sure that our analysis is correct. And we have County continue to do it, even though we know we can handle it inside. But again, it's, as Sarah was mentioning, we do it because our auditors are happiest knowing that it's being run and analyzed by County, and we can prove that it's accurate.
So can I say that it helps you reduce your audit bills as well because the auditors don't have to spend as much time reviewing the stock plan? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember from my days at stock administration, I always got the newest, youngest person on the audit team showing up, and I'd have to explain what a stock option was and what the reports were. And I always thought, am I being charged for this? Because I'm educating your people. But yeah, it's a real time sink. So as we kind of come to the end here, because I hope this has been helpful for people who are considering it. One thing, Karen, we didn't talk about, both Penumbra and ThreadUp are public companies, but in terms of private companies, anything different that you would say if someone was a private company, like, especially if they're thinking about IPO, are there special things that they should think about in terms of outsourcing prior to IPO, or do you think it doesn't really matter?
So I think it does matter. Private companies, if you're thinking about outsourcing and you're going IPO, should kind of consider it before going IPO, only because we can walk you through the process of IPO and making that switch from private to public, especially on your equity platform, because usually there is some type of implementation that needs to be done. And usually when you're private, right before you go public, we will do an audit. I mean, your law firm will usually do an audit as well, but we will, just to make sure that database that we're working off of has the equity in there correctly 100% before you go public and you start releasing shares and your employees can start to sell them. So if you're considering going IPO, I would suggest, and you're going to outsource, I would suggest you do it before you go
6
public.
to 9 months or so. Is that what you would say?
Usually it's about 6 months
Okay.
beforehand that they'll start to engage us, just so that we can, we have enough time to get the work done that
Yeah.
needs to be done beforehand.
Yeah. And I think what people don't realize, in the private world, you're managing the cap table and you're managing your stock plans. And in the public world, you've got a transfer agent now who's managing, quote, the cap table. And you've got a stock plan, advisor who's trading the shares and providing wealth management services and things like that. So you have to split that, that database. And a lot of these cap table companies don't manage public company stock plans. So there's some generally conversion and other work that has to happen as well, not just auditing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's 100% correct.
Yeah.
And we do that. We do prep with the client for their IPO. So we'll help them with their transfer agent. We'll help them with like their mass issuance file. We will help them, with the new plans that got to be set up once they're approved by the board. So we do get engaged with them to make sure that they're ready for the IPO, and two, what to expect after they go IPO when they're public.
Yeah. Okay. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, it's January. Do you want to just give everyone a reminder of what they need to do if they've been granting ISO or ESPP?
Sure. Currently underway is our 6039 reporting. So we're working with our clients now on the 3921 statements as well as the 3922 statements, which need to be mailed by January 31st, which I think is a weekend. So I think we have until February 1st to get them out the door, printed and mailed.
February 2nd. Monday will be the February 2nd. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. In the 2nd.
Yeah.
And then we also do the IRS filings for the statements that we're generating. So we are currently busy, yes, working day and night to get those completed for our clients.
Okay. And if you're listening and you don't know what Karen's talking about, you should reach out to Karen because this is required. Great. Well, we are at our time here, and I really want to thank Kirsten and Sarah for your time and sharing your opinions and your thoughts here. And Karen, always a pleasure to connect with you. I hope if anybody has questions, they can reach out to Kirsten or Sarah, especially Kirsten, your unusual ESPP plan, if anybody wants to understand about the rebate type of program. I thought it was a little different than what I've heard from other companies before. Karen, thanks for everything. I know you're super busy this month getting things ready for tax time too. So all of that is on your desk. So anyways, thanks so much. In the little outro video, you'll see all the contact information for everybody. So feel free to reach out directly if you have questions. And other words, thanks so much, everybody. Great way to start the year, and hope that everybody has a good year as we start 2026. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed the discussion with Sarah, Kirsten, Karen, and Kareen. For more information about these speakers, please scan the QR code for their LinkedIn pages or visit us on countsy.com. Please follow us on our LinkedIn page for updates on upcoming webinars, and we look forward to seeing you at our next one. From all of us at Countsy, thank you again, and have a good rest of your day.